All right, today, here, for those of us who are sticking around, we get to look at one of the most popular stories in the Bible. People who even maybe aren't Jesus followers know this story. It's the story from John 11, where Jesus raises his good friend Lazarus from the dead. So you're welcome to take out your Bibles, if you wish, to John chapter 11, if you want to just follow along as we go this morning. Well, let me give you just a little bit of context and timing for this story. Because often we read the story all by itself, and we don't know how it fits into maybe the bigger picture of Jesus' life. So when Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, he's towards the end of his ministry. Right? His 3 years of ministry are almost over. He's told almost all of the parables he's ever going to tell. He's healed most of the people that he's going to heal. He's taught his disciples almost everything that he's going to teach them. And he has frustrated all the religious leaders and the Pharisees so much that they are just boiling over with anger at him already. Okay? So we're towards the end, and here in John chapter 11, as I mentioned earlier, we see Jesus shift his attention away from this ministry he's been doing for 3 years. Now he sets his focus on going to Jerusalem. Going to Jerusalem where he's going to celebrate the Passover feast and where he knows that he's going to be arrested, that he's going to be beaten, that he's going to be crucified, and that he's going to die. Okay, he literally turns his feet towards Jerusalem here in this story because we're going to see him going to the city of Bethany, which is where Lazarus lives, right? And Bethany is a little village just outside of Jerusalem. So he's literally walking now towards Jerusalem, physically coming close. Okay, there's your context. And I want you to hear this story in a little bit of a different way this morning. Sometimes when stories are familiar, we don't hear them well. So I'm going to read it to you in a different way. In Kids Zone next Sunday, they're going to be reading this book called Goodbye to Goodbyes. I'm going to read it to you today. Okay, it's the story of Lazarus, and the pictures are so great that I scanned them in, and they're going to be up on the screen for you to look at, okay? So here is Goodbye to Goodbyes, which is John chapter 11, put towards children. In the little town of Bethany, there lived a man named Lazarus, and he had 2 sisters, Mary and Martha. Martha loved to throw a party. Mary loved to sit and listen. And Lazarus loved his 2 sisters. And they were all friends with a man named Jesus. But one day, Lazarus got sick. He went to bed sick, and he woke up sick. Mary and Martha looked after him, but Lazarus got worse and worse. I know, said Martha. I will tell our friend Jesus. He can help. Martha thought about all that Jesus had done. He made blind people see. He made deaf people hear. He made people who had been sick walk and jump and run and leap for joy. He could make Lazarus well. So she and Mary sent a message to Jesus. Lord Jesus, our brother Lazarus, the friend that you love, is sick. Come quickly. It took 2 days for Martha's message to reach Jesus. And when Jesus heard that his friend was very, very sick, he did nothing. Did nothing? That's right. He didn't ride the first donkey to Bethany. He didn't run until his side hurt. For 2 whole days, he stayed right where he was. Why? Well, Jesus told his disciples, Our friend Lazarus is very sick. But this illness will not end with Lazarus being dead. We won't have to say goodbye forever. I have a plan. Whew, Jesus has a plan. But what was it? Then at last, Jesus and his disciples headed to Bethany. Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, Jesus announced, but I'm on my way to wake him up. The disciples looked at each other. Did they hear him right? Lazarus was sleeping? Couldn't Mary and Martha wake him up? Well, Jesus knew their questions. He looked at them and he said, Lazarus has died. Dead? How could this be? Didn't Jesus say that Lazarus would not die? Didn't he say they wouldn't have to say goodbye forever? What happened to his plan? Every step to Bethany felt heavier and heavier. Their hearts sank deeper and deeper. They were sad their friend had died, and they didn't even get to say goodbye. 4 days after Lazarus had died, Jesus and his disciples finally arrived. Martha came running to meet them. Her face was sad. Her eyes were red. Lord, she gasped, if only you had been here, Lazarus would not have died. But I know nothing is impossible with you. Even after someone's died and we've said our forever goodbyes. You're right, Martha, Jesus said. There is a day coming when we will say goodbye to saying goodbyes forever. Do you believe that? Martha nodded. Yes, I believe in you, Jesus. I know that you are the Son of God, and I know you will always do what you promise. You will end all of our goodbyes forever. Martha went and fetched Mary. Mary was so sad. The brother she loved was gone. She would never hug him again. She would never eat with him again. She would never see his face again. Jesus saw her tears, and then it happened. His heart broke. He knew what he was about to do. He knew Lazarus' goodbye was not forever. But his heart broke for his friends. When they reached Lazarus' tomb, Jesus cried too. They cried and cried and cried because they had to say a forever goodbye. But then Jesus stopped crying and said, "Take away the stone." Martha told him there might be a horrible smell. Jesus said, "You need to believe me." So they took away the stone. And he yelled like a lion's mighty roar, "Lazarus, come out!" And he did. Jesus kept his word. Lazarus being sick did not end with him being dead. It ended with him alive even after he died, after they'd had to say goodbye. Mary, Martha, Lazarus, and Jesus were together again. And Martha threw a party. Mary laughed and listened. Lazarus was glad to be alive. But then came the time for Jesus to say goodbye. He hugged his friends that he loved, And he said, goodbye for now, but not forever. What a great story, isn't it? What a great story. It takes you all the way from the depths of sorrow to just immense joy that I can't imagine. I mean, I wish I could have been a part of that party afterwards, right? Not Martha threw. What would it be like to be at the party and see Lazarus sitting right there when you knew that he had been dead? What an amazing thing. I wonder what that party, is that a birthday party? Does he get 2 birthday parties now? What an amazing thing. You know, that story is so familiar. Right? And sometimes when stories become familiar, it becomes easy to just hear them and not be amazed again, right? Or to hear them and miss all kinds of important details, because I know this story, and so I don't really pay attention. So this morning, I want us to look beyond the miracle, beyond the amazing miracle of Lazarus being raised from the dead, and to see what Jesus is telling us about who he is and what he's doing through this story that he designed so specifically, right? And so let's look at what Jesus does here, beyond just the miracle. Right? The first thing we see Jesus doing when he arrives is we see him doing for Mary and Martha what any of us would do when we go to visit somebody that we love. Somebody who's hurting, someone who's sad. Right? He speaks words of comfort to Martha and then to Mary. Right? So Martha's the first one to run out to meet him, and then Mary meets him a bit later, and they both say the same thing, right? If you had been here, my brother would not have died, right? Their hearts are hurting. And Jesus responds to them by putting their brother's death into a bigger context. He gives them the bigger picture of what's going on. If you were here last Sunday, we talked about the book of Revelation and how in the Revelation, God kind of pulls back the curtain and lets us see the bigger picture of what's going on. We see a little bit and he says, I'll give you a glimpse of what's going on in the heavenly realms. Well, Jesus kind of does that here for Mary and Martha. Let me give you a picture, a bigger picture of what's going on. And so he says to them, your brother will rise again, right? I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Right? There's the bigger picture. He reminds them that there is victory coming, that death does not have the last word, that life has the last word, eternal life. He speaks the comforting truth of God's promise. God's promise that can turn our mourning into dancing, our sorrow into joy. I can turn death into life, because that's what God does. And so he comes and he speaks these words of comfort to them, these truths of God. Now, can I just maybe pause here a moment and give a little bit of a practical advice for us? Maybe a little bit of a practical warning here for the times when we go to meet someone we love who's in deep sorrow. Okay? To someone who's in the middle of that kind of hurt, that kind of deep pain. Sometimes these words of truth can sound very uncaring if they're not spoken wisely and in the right context. Right? So I've heard many times going to visit somebody whose spouse has died, child has died, whoever they love has died, and someone says to them, but you know, they're in a better place right now. True. Very true. But you know how often they hear that phrase? They hear that phrase as, you really shouldn't be so sad. You really shouldn't be so torn up about this because they're in a better place, so just be happy. Right? Or Or when maybe there's another pain in life, maybe a broken relationship, a deep, deep hurt. And we come and we say, you know what, God must have a better plan for you. Or, Romans says all things will work together for good. Both true things, absolutely. But if we're not careful, you know how they can hear that word? They can hear it as, you know what, you should really just trust God more. And if you just trusted God more, you wouldn't be so sad. Okay? The reality is those two seemingly opposite things can be true at the same time. I know that the person I love is now in heaven, and I'm still really, really sad. I know that God will care for me, and I trust him. But I still really need to cry right now. I know that all things work together for good for those who love God, because that's a promise he made. And right now, I just feel really, really bad. Those things can both be true. So be careful. We need to be careful that our words of comfort don't just dismiss their pain. And Jesus here in this story made sure that his words of comfort don't just dismiss Mary and Martha's pain. I love this part of the story. We see that Jesus shares Mary's pain, shares Martha's pain and sorrow so completely, right? And the book says that his heart broke. And it pictured him at the tomb, and it said, they, including Jesus, cried and cried and cried. And the book can say that because the Bible tells us that. The Bible tells us that Jesus was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. It tells us that Jesus wept. And that's a soul crying going on here. And think about it. If anybody knew that they didn't need to cry, that they didn't need to be sad, Jesus knew that. He knew that in maybe about 15 minutes, I don't know how long it was, he's going to raise Lazarus from the dead. He knew that all their tears were about to be turned into joy. He knew that there was a party that was about to happen. He could have said, hey, don't worry about this. Just everybody stop. Watch this. It's not what he did. He took the time to fully experience with Mary and Martha the depth of the sorrow of losing a brother that you love. He experienced for himself the depth of the grief of losing a best friend, because Lazarus was his best friend, one of his best friends. He stepped fully into that moment. We have a word for that. It's called empathy, right? Jesus felt what they felt. Honestly, deeply. He did not ignore their pain. Instead, he chooses to fully experience it with them. And he honestly sits there at the tomb and weeps with them. Wow. That's exactly what Jesus still does for you and for me today. If you have ever been in a place where your heart hurts so deeply, where grief and sorrow is so seemingly overwhelming that you feel like you are all alone, that nobody knows the depths of your sorrow and your hurt and your sadness, remember this moment. Know that Jesus does. Because Jesus doesn't come to you in those moments and simply speak comforting words of truth from afar. Say, hey, remember I rose, it's all going to be okay. No, that's not the God that we have. He doesn't just ignore your pain because of the future hope that's yours. He steps into your sorrow and he speaks his comforting truth from right there with you. right in the middle of your hurt and pain and tears. He feels them right along with you, and he weeps right along with you. And think about, if you're willing, think about your greatest sorrow. Think about the hurt that just comes to mind right now. The times that you have wept. Maybe you're still weeping right now. And you felt like you're all alone. You're never alone. Right in that moment, Jesus is there sharing your sadness, sharing your tears. He knows you. He sees you. He's right there with you. What other religion has a God like that? A God who does that, who cares like that, who loves like that, who is close, heart to heart with you like that. Psalm 56 verse 8 says that, the psalmist writes about God, says, "You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in a bottle. You have recorded each one in your book." You have collected each tear in your bottle. What an image of God caring enough to be right there with you. No tear goes uncollected, unnoticed by him. You are not alone in your sorrow. But I'm so glad the story of Lazarus doesn't end there. Because Jesus doesn't just leave us stuck in our sadness. He doesn't leave us drowning in our tears. He does something about it, right? In the story, he tells them to roll the stone away, he says. They say, no, we shouldn't do that. Roll the stone away. And he yelled like a lion's mighty roar, "Lazarus, come out." And he did. And he did. Our God, Jesus, doesn't just speak words of hope into our most hopeless situations. No, he does something about it, right? He brings about redemption. He has the power to bring life out of death, to bring joy out of sorrow, to bring laughter out of tears. He has the power to give us true hope in the middle of your situation that feels completely hopeless. Jesus is in the business of redeeming the brokenness of this world and restoring it, making it right again. I would have loved to have been there to see Lazarus come out, all wrapped up in his grave clothes, probably tripping over him, right? As he's trying to peel them off. I would have loved to have been at that party, right? I would have loved to have been a part of this story of new life and the joy. Imagine the joy. Can you imagine the joy of being there? And that's exactly the point of this story. Because there is a resurrection story that you and I do get to be a part of. There is a resurrection celebration that we do get to share. We're going to be there. We are there. Right? It's no coincidence that Jesus' journey to Jerusalem starts here with a death and a resurrection. Right? This resurrection story is about to get repeated again in just a few days. And this time it's going to be Jesus who gets called out of the tomb. And this time it's you and me who get to celebrate afterwards. Because we're going to celebrate not just his new life, but we're going to celebrate because the new life he walked out with, he gives to you and he gives to me. We are resurrected right along with him this time. Right? Jesus sees the brokenness in this world. Right? He sees the pain of our sin and the sorrow of our brokenness and our broken hearts. He steps into that pain. He experiences it right along with us. And then he chooses to do something about it. Right? He chooses to go to Jerusalem, and he chooses to let himself be arrested, and he chooses to let himself be beaten. He chooses to stay silent in front of his accusers. He chooses to be nailed to a cross. He could have stopped at any time, and he chooses to die. And he chooses to do all that, to take your place and my place as a sacrifice for our sin, making full payment for our guilt so that we can be made new, so we can be made restored again, so our brokenness can be made whole. And when he walked out of that tomb alive 3 days later, he chooses to give his resurrection life to you. His forgiveness, his grace, his restoration, his hope. He gives you the joy. The joy. This is a bigger resurrection story than the Lazarus resurrection story. Jesus' resurrection story is my resurrection story. It's your joy and mine. Can I give you some homework for today? Here's your homework. It will take you 10 minutes tops. Your homework for today, read John chapter 11 from your Bible. I read it from the children's storybook, and it's very true to the story. I want you to read the real story again. And here's why I want you to do it. I want you to take 10 minutes and read John 11 sometime today. Maybe as a family around the table. My family grew up doing devotions around the table, so we'd eat lunch together and then have devotions. Maybe for today, as a family, read John chapter 11. To be reminded of what we just talked about. It's easy to walk out of here and forget, right? So here, that's a reminder. But here's why else I want you to read it again. Because you might be surprised at how this story ends. I didn't read the whole chapter for you. There's more. You might be surprised at how this story ends. Because not everybody's happy that Lazarus has life again. You think they would be, right? What an amazing thing. And the people who were there at the tomb, they were. John tells us, yep, those who saw, they believed, they had a party, and they celebrated. Praise God. But if you read this chapter, you're going to find out that the Pharisees, the religious leaders who doubted Jesus, who hated Jesus, to them, Lazarus' resurrection was the final straw for them. You're going to read verse 50, where it says that one of the Pharisees, the one in charge, said, it's better that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish. You're going to read verse 53, that says, from that day on, they plotted to kill him. This was the final straw, and they said, okay, decision made. We're going to kill this guy. Lazarus' new life is the starting point of Jesus' death and in his own resurrection. So read the chapter. But know this, when you read that ending, it isn't their plotting and their hatred that brings Jesus to the cross and that puts him in the grave. It's not. It is his heart of love and compassion for you that brought him to the cross and put him in the grave. Jesus chooses to die for me and for you. Jesus chooses to die because he wants you to experience a resurrection. He wants you to come alive with him. Jesus chooses to die because he knows and he feels your brokenness and your sorrow and your tears, and he wants to do something about it, and he does. His death and his resurrection offer you a hope when you feel hopeless, offers you a future when you can't see it, offers you strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow. So know this. Jesus, in love, meets you right where you are, in the middle of your brokenness, in the middle of your sorrow. And in love, he offers you new life. He offers you a resurrection life. Can I read one more page to this story? I didn't put it up on the screen. You're just going to have to listen to it. So he just said goodbye, right? Jesus had to go to Jerusalem, where he would be the one to say goodbye and die. And then, like Lazarus, walk out of the tomb alive. And after that, Jesus said goodbye again, because he was going back to heaven. It was sad for Jesus' friends to say goodbye, but they would see him again in the land that lay after their dying, in the land where there are no more goodbyes, not ever. Would you pray with me?